Welcome to the garden question and answer video that I do every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video. That's where we pick questions from each week. There are 24 that Steph has written down from last week's video and a few from the week before that. We actually probably have enough to do almost another video right now. You guys are asking such great questions right now. We're writing them down. I try to answer between 20 and 25 every week. That's usually what I try to answer. That usually works out to about a 40 minute to an hour long video, something like that. I'll have details on the open garden. I'm going to do it about the middle of the video because I'm sure some folks want me to get into questions a little faster that aren't coming to the open garden and have heard these details. So jump ahead a little further up in the video for details on the open garden event, which this will be the last question and answer video before that. I'll see a lot of you before I talk to the camera again on the question and answer. So I look forward to folks coming. Let's see. I mentioned last week that I did put a price and a combo in place over on the website for the weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series. If you don't own either, you can buy them both together for one price. There's a discount code for individual discounts on either one of them down below this video. Happy Father's Day to everyone. That'll be as you're watching this, the day you're watching this. My son will be here with me on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to that. Let's go ahead and jump into some questions. Again, I've got I'll have the details for the open garden somewhere about question 10 or so. Somebody asked, our old plant species, I think what they meant was cultivars or named varieties of plants, of things like hydrangea, are the old ones or the new ones better or worse? Should we discard old plants and replace them with the same plants but newer, more up-to-date cultivars or selections of those plants? If your plants are doing well, then don't worry about it. Somebody asked, and that actually is coming up, question 4. I'm going to jump to question 4 real quick. What is the hydrangea you are next to? So in last week's Q&A, I set up over here next to the screen porch, and I was standing next to a hydrangea over there. That's Nico Blue. Nico Blue has been around forever. It's not remontant, so it doesn't bloom on the old wood and the new wood like some of the newer ones does. But it blooms beautifully over there, and it blooms for a long time. And so there's really no reason to take it out. It's in good shape. It doesn't have bad leaf spot issues. It's in really good shape over there. So my argument would be, no, I wouldn't take that out. I do have 2 other, maybe more than that, remontant hydrangeas. There's the newer model of big leaf hydrangeas where they bloom on old wood and new wood. So you get some flowers, even if you get some winter damage, or you get an extended flowering time. But I don't think I would take that one out, the old one out, because it's in such great shape. The only way I would take one out to replace it is if I had an issue with the other one in some way or another. It was declining in some way. And then if it had some sort of disease problem, I probably wouldn't come back in with the same type of plant, period. Even if it was the newer, better, the newer improved variety, I just wouldn't put the same plant back in the same space. So no, I'm not gonna change my garden based on new or updated things or disease resistant things or any of that kind of stuff, unless I'm having issues with the plants I already have. You take something like bee balm. This is just the straight species, red bee balm back here, but there are newer bee balms that don't have as much powdery mildew as some of the old ones, and so that's pretty exciting. And we have one of them out by the street out there. But there's nothing wrong with this, and it looks great. It's a bit of a bully back here, but why would I take that out? There's nothing that I will say. Some of the old, if you're talking about natives like this bee balm, some of the old, my straight species coneflowers out by the road get way more pollinator visits than my powwow coneflowers. The newer ones that are short and perfect, they get pollinators, but if you can tell that if the bees are actually choosing, and the goldfinches are choosing, and everybody's choosing what they want, that the straight species ones, the old varieties, are actually better for pollinators. So again, I'm just not going to change anything in the garden because something is newer or better. That doesn't mean I won't go buy it and find a hole for that newer, and have fun with it for sure. Let's see. So somebody last week they have a Japanese maple that has there's a weeping Japanese maple behind me. We have lots of Japanese maples in this garden now. Has a Y growth right up at the top where 2 branches split, and it started to split open. Should they bind them together and allow them to heal back into one, or cut one off into 1 liter? If it's an upright Japanese maple and it's split below the level that you'd like to have it split, so if you're trying to grow, you know, like this Tokyo Tower, this Chinese upright fringe tree here, because I'm trying to grow it as a single trunk, I didn't want the split to be down 2 feet off the ground. I need it higher than that. So if it's an upright Japanese maple, I'm probably going to take the one side off that has the least amount of wood and stake the other one straight, is probably what I'm going to do with it. If it's a lower growing one, a weeping one like this, I might tie them together and see how that works. Okay, let's see. Number 3, actually it'll be number 4 kind of, because I already answered 4, which is that hydrangea being Nico Blue, which is one of the old varieties. I grew tens of thousands of Nico Blue hydrangeas over the years in gallon pots that I sold to other nurseries. Okay, somebody asked, is cutting blossoms off Hosta keep the foliage fresher longer? I don't know if it does in the future all that much, but initially some people will cut the flowers out of their hostas the first couple of years after they put them in the ground, and some folks will do that with lots of plants. They'll take the apples and peaches and plums and stuff off of their fruit trees the first few years, persimmons, whatever, pomegranates. Some people will cut flowers back on hydrangeas, maybe even allowing them to get established and not be in full bloom the first summer they're in the ground. So there are some reasons for doing that, for having the plant not put energy into that. Certainly once the flowers start to fade on some of the things in your garden, you can cut those flower scapes back, the flower stalks back, and prevent it from trying to make seed, because that seed production is going to take energy away from the plant. Once they get some size and some time in the ground, I'm just not going to think about that kind of thing. I think you're going to be, I just don't think you need to worry about it beyond that first year or two. If you were going to worry, I don't worry about it at all. I let them bloom. Maybe it slows them down, this much year over year. I have no idea. What is the best large growing hosta? So there are tons of now giant hostas out in the world, and they're mostly from Empress Wu, which was, one of the original really big large growing hostas out there on the market, and a lot of breeding has been done with that one. We talked about that in the hosta video last week. There's a full-blown red hosta coming in the next couple of years, but we saw it slowly happen from, first we had red petioles, the part that holds the leaf up, and then you can see it spreading out into the leaf on some of the newer varieties. And we're going to the Netherlands later this summer, and hoping to show you that just red hosta that's coming. It's pretty wild. It's a couple years from probably having numbers and being everywhere, but it will be soon enough. Red foliage hosta, fully red. So again, they're taking, you find a giant one and then you just run down that lane of crossing big ones with big ones and see if you can make them bigger and bigger, and then keep selecting for that. That New Hampshire hosta site is a good one to go to. They have an entire page of giants. How do we combat slugs? With our we don't have a big slug problem out here, but I do kind of keep, we keep our leaves out here in the garden. Some of the areas that have hosta in them, I do go back and rake those leaves back, and I think you're better off with the hardwood mulch below them, or some sort of very clean mulch with kind of a crispy top on the top of it, so where it stays a little bit dry right in that little top part. But if you give them a lot of leaf litter and that kind of thing, it's a good hiding place for them. You won't get rid of all of them, but that's at least some control to have no weeds, if you can, if you can help it. No things leaning up against them, no leaves piled up under them, no pots near them. The snails and slugs are under these containers out here, so make sure you got feet under your containers if your containers are sitting out in the beds. That's a good hiding place. You getting rid of hiding places for slugs and snails. Let's see, how do we deal with watering? So initially I was going to have drip irrigation in this entire place and show all that off and do the content around it. And then I was like, I don't want to maintain all that drip irrigation in the future, and I'd really like to have a resilient, to build soil health above all else, and that would build a resilient garden that I can feel comfortable leaving here for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and not have to worry about watering it, other than containers, obviously, or something that's been very newly planted this season, maybe something that was kind of root bound and it's kind of struggled to get itself rooted in. But everything else that's been here for 2 or 3 years, I'm just not watering at this point, unless it goes really, really dry. So I'll overhead irrigate. I'll set up, I've got 2 large, very large tripods for sprinklers. I can set one up right here where I'm standing and do pretty much, half of this back garden in one sprinkler head. And I prefer to water the entire area and not plant to plant. If I'm going to water everything. If I'm going to water the space, I'm going to just go ahead and water the space. So I'll set the timer on the oven for 40 minutes or something, and then I'll hear the beep and I'll come out here and move it somewhere. Haven't had to do that the entire season this year. Leading up to the open garden last year, we were 6 or 7, 8 weeks without rain leading up to it, and we were doing it, we probably did it 3 times a week leading up to that, because I wanted the garden looking its best. I would not have done that, had I not have been inviting people here to see the beautiful garden. What I really like with irrigation is that people make decisions on whether the irrigation starts or runs, and doesn't run just because it's Tuesday at 8 o'clock in the morning and this is when we irrigate this space. Or at least have some sort of device on it that measures rainfall and that kind of thing. So you're trying to build a resilient garden. I've pulled plants up on foundation plantings where people were basically watering their foundation plants with their turf irrigation, and gone in and dug the plants up 8 years later, and the root ball basically the exact same as it was when it went in the ground originally, just because the plant had no reason to root out. In fact, it was like kind of retreating, going, please stop all this water near me. So, just trying to build some resilience out here. And how often is just if it's dry. I haven't had to water. I haven't had to do it this year. Happy to have not had to do it so far this year. Sometime before the summer's over, I'm probably going to have to put the risers out here and water, through here. But it's going to be based on observation. Again, a newer garden, newly planted things that you planted a lot of this spring, you may be doing more of this, than I am. Let's see. And then, okay, what time of day is best? Everybody's going to tell you like early morning is best, because they're going to tell you that if the water stays on the leaves overnight, they're going to get powdery mildew and they're going to get this problem and they're going to get that problem. But 90% of the rain we get here in North Carolina happens around 5 o'clock in the evening to around 8 o'clock in the evening all summer long, and the leaves stay wet all night, and somehow, they've survived despite that. So I would prefer the plants to go into the evening with water. Most plant growth happens overnight when, they're not trying to grow while the sun's out here. They're just collecting that energy from the sun. And then at night, they're putting that to work and actually growing. So I don't want them to go into the night dry. Water when you need to. If that's 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 8 in the morning, if you see that the garden's overall kind of dry, water it. I mean, again, I'm trying to do it all on observation. If you do it on observation, you'll give the plants exactly the amount of water when they need it, and have your water bill be the lowest, and conserving as much as possible. Okay, somebody asked black versus white shade cloth for a greenhouse. So I'm guessing when they're talking about white shade cloth, I guess you can get white shade cloth, but most of the time what you'll see on greenhouses is going to be either the white poly plastic or black shade cloth, which will have the holes in it. I prefer, see right here in Raleigh, we can't really keep the white plastic on the houses during the summertime without taking the end walls off. It gets too hot inside the greenhouse to have a plastic over the top of them. So I prefer to use white plastic over the houses in the wintertime to keep the heat in, and then cut that plastic off, use it for something else, hopefully on the farm, and then put black shade cloth over the top. The black shade cloth allows you, and it is expensive. They put expensive with an exclamation point. Much more expensive than, of course, everything is more expensive in the last 5 years. But that black shade cloth should last you a long time. I've got a couple giant ones in the shed over there that I used for covering plants in the back of the truck. I use it for covering things out here in the garden when I need to. But the thing with the black shade cloth is you get to buy it in the percentage of shade that you want it to be. So you can buy 30%, 40%, 50%, 60% shade. So depending on what you're growing in that house, are they actually shade plants that you're growing in there? Then you'd want 50% shade cloth. If it's just stuff you're trying to lightly protect, but you don't want them stretching out, you'd only want maybe 30% shade cloth. So you can really fine tune the black shade cloth to what you need. And then I use the white poly on the house in the winter time to keep plants warm. Okay, but in the summertime here, you won't go to many greenhouses here in the south and see the plastic polys on them in the wintertime, the white plastic on the small houses. They'll cut it off. And you gotta cut it off. The other problem with the white poly is it can get your plants growing pretty early in the greenhouse. And then when you pull the poly off, that new growth has not experienced that direct sun and it'll get burned. But if you pull the poly off too early before the new growth starts so that they don't get burned, then you've got the frost problem that you would have had without having it on there. So it's really hard to manage white poly or white plastic here in the south. Let's see. Somebody asked about planting during all this rain in North Carolina. They usually water deeply, then walk away. But with all this rain, do I have to water at all? I think you want to water plants in at least some to make sure that there's no large air pockets around them. So I don't want to stomp. I've said this many times planting. Be careful going around. I had guys working for me. They just wanted to stomp the soil back in around the plant really, really hard. There's a delicate balance here between that soil needs to have some air in it and giant air pockets. I don't want giant air pockets, that could damage roots and be a place where there's no water, obviously, for the plant, that roots in that section could die. So I need to make sure the voids are filled in without stomping all the air out of it. So be careful when you're planting when it's this wet, because it's really easy to overstomp the soil down and stomp all the air out of it. Plants need air down there in the roots, just not big air pockets. So just in general, a few things. I don't like to put a lot of foot traffic in the beds when they're extremely wet. Although my soil now is much, much harder to compact because I have all this organic material here. It's spongy. It just comes right back. And I can't walk on it, 20 times a day and expect that to happen. But if I'm occasionally in the bed, it's not that big of a deal anymore. But if you have heavy clay soils, haven't been amended all that much, that foot traffic can cause some damage to your soil when it's extremely wet. But I just water gently. Make sure you're getting those voids, those larger voids filled in, and then get out of there as fast as you can. So somebody said, if we vanished, how would land change? Farmland, forests, suburbs, prairies. Well, obviously, if you came back to this house and no one lived in it, for 100 years, it basically, a lot of it would just be gone. There'd be trees growing up through it, probably. These houses need to be lived in for sure. I think what they were actually asking is, would all these invasive plants just take over? So there's, back here behind me is a wall of, I have a native white oak and a Magnolia grandiflora back here that are native. And there's a black cherry that's native over here. But then going back from that, it's English ivy and Rosa Sharon and Eleagnus and all the privet, all the ligustrum types that we would have back there, and on and on and on. So would that stuff just take over everything? Well, initially, maybe. It would probably outcompete a lot of the things that we've done, outcompete natives coming back in these spaces that would be reclaimed. So your lawn would immediately become, in the south, where woodlands grow, which is most of the southeast, you would have trees coming up in your lawn. Some of those things would be initially invasive, but keep in mind, almost all the plants in North America are born in fire. So these plants may or may not actually be fire resistant. So at some point, the natural system is going to take over, and lightning is going to cause fires, and there's not going to be people here to put those fires out. And so there's going to be, you're gonna go back to a natural cycle of the land being burned occasionally. And when the land's burned occasionally, then that advantage goes back to the native plants that evolved in fire. They were born in fire. And that was going to be the case on the West Coast. That's going to be the case in Texas, all the Southeast. We have a lot of lightning across North America. So obviously, I have no idea, but I'm just throwing it out there that I think that in a natural situation, if this property was burning occasionally, you know, once every whatever amount of years, that the native plants are built for that. And some of these invasive plants would not be. They would have to adjust to that real quick. One coming up over the house, so I'll change the angle here. In dry climates, zone 10B, like Southern California, would you need to water regularly to break down mulch? Yes. So you could probably get away with using drip irrigation under it, potentially, or again, some overhead irrigation. You're much better out though, but much better off in California with the drip irrigation system under your mulch, so you're not losing all that in low humidity. All that moisture is going to evaporate into the air. It's just money is just drifting away. So, and of course, it's a valuable resource as well. But I don't think you're going to get the mulch to break down normally, nor are the plants that are there necessarily plants that were evolved for that. You know, in the deep part of Southern California, I mean, most of those plants were evolved to grow in different. If you were using native plants or plants from areas that are similar to Southern California, so Mediterranean type plants, they probably don't necessarily need that mulch relationship as much. So you can, you know, it's just, you may just need to be doing probably should be doing a different type of landscaping altogether. I know it's hard though to, that's not a great answer for anybody, because there's a certain look people have for what a garden should look like, and wherever you live on the planet, that's kind of what you want it to look like. And the crispy mulch and all this, you know, has a look to it that people like. Okay. Number 10, what is your favorite show and why is it Clarkson's Farm? That was a pretty funny question. I do watch Clarkson's Farm. I watched Top Gear for all the seasons that that Clarkson was on Top Gear. This is one of the funniest shows ever, and Clarkson's Farm does not disappoint either. If you haven't watched that show, it's really quite funny watching. He calls him a self-proclaimed oaf, basically trying to farm. Is really kind of funny. But I've always liked everything he's ever been in, including the Amazon show that those guys continued after Top Gear was also good. But yeah, it's right up there for us. We do watch Clarkson's Farm. Let's see, the open garden details. Let me do that real quick. So the address here is 709 Harris Street. The Friday evening time slot is from 5 to 8 o'clock. And on Friday, all day, Juniper Level Botanic Garden's open for anybody who's got a ticket for this. You can go there. There'll be plants for sale, whatever you want to do. You can, the whole day, not just the morning, but if you're coming here on Saturday, you can go there on Friday afternoon if you wanted to. And then the morning time slot is 7 to 11, and then 1 to 5 is the afternoon time slot for Saturday. Again, I've asked folks not to necessarily park here on Harris unless you have some sort of mobility issue. There's lots of parking around the neighborhood. We've let all of our neighbors know. In fact, Steph made cookies the other day and delivered them to all of our neighbors. Our neighbors are all nice, super nice folks. And they almost seemed to invested a little bit in this garden as well. If you don't have access to the original email you got back as a receipt, just give us your name when you get here, and we'll compare it to the list, and you're good to go, no problem. It's a bee-friendly landscape, meaning there's lots of bees out here. So if you have an allergy, make sure you're prepared for that. There will be t-shirts for sale. We have a special open garden t-shirt for this year. Hopefully he's going to be here in the next few days. Of course, all the other t-shirts that we have will be available as well. You can avoid some shipping charges there. There'll be giveaways every hour, and there'll be a video you'll see right after this one, probably on Monday. I'll show off all the plants that we got. Southern Living Plant Collection and sent us a lot of stuff. We've got better boxwood. I've got hats to give away. I've got Soil3 Compost, Pro Pluggers, all kinds of stuff. We don't have a lot of giveaways. And gardens in the area, obviously Juniper Level is going to be open on that Friday. The Ralston is open every day of the week over here. Duke Gardens in Durham is definitely worth going to. The North Carolina Botanic Garden in Chapel Hill is native garden for North Carolina. And there you go. And then somebody had asked about the proceeds. So I will have already given a check to the Ralston this weekend. I'm speaking at the Plant Symposium, and some of the money that you guys have given us, that's one of the places that the money's going to. So thank you for that. It's a pretty good sized check. So really am super appreciative of that. And the Gardens of Southeastern North Carolina will have a check going there as well. And I haven't decided on the other two. I had just said those two in that list, and then I was dividing it out, trying to figure out. There'll be at least 4, maybe 5 gardens that will get some of the proceeds from you guys buying the tickets, and the first one going out as I'm shooting this a day from now. Okay, there you go. There's the open garden details. Somebody said I need a video on how to envision or design mixed border screen. They had 70 Leyland cypress, and they don't want perfect uniform soldiers, but it's hard to envision. I think it's really, so I would pick where you really need the screen. I would go with things like that are fast growing, really those kind of more common things, maybe Shindo viburnum or green giant arborvitae or something, where if you stand out on your patio and go, that's the spot, I really need to get that to go away really quickly. That's the place where I plug those big, fast-growing evergreen screening plants into. And then the rest of it, just have fun. It doesn't, once this stuff grows together, nobody's gonna know what it is. I mean, I've got 3 Osmanthus fragrans back here, got this Carolina Midnight Loropetalum sitting in the middle of it, got a Clayera over there, got another type of Osmanthus over there, got a Podocarpus in there. I've got a holly over there, got a viburnum and a lycium, 2 more hollies back there. Just have fun, buy what you want. As long as it gets big, put it in the line. And once they grow together in a wall, nobody's gonna, be guessing, what it is or how it is. You don't necessarily need great design skills to just go and buy large growing plants, fast large growing plants that make you happy. Just use lots of different ones. There's 17, I think I had counted 17 different. Yeah, is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 13 different things in that screen right there. Not all of them have filled completely in, as you can see, but there's 13 different plants I used in just this little short one right here. So just have fun with it. I didn't sit here and go think about how it's going to be. Texturally, it probably looks good to mix the occasional conifer in, a gold foliage plant, something with narrower foliage, something with larger foliage. If you want to rotate those kinds of things, that may be helpful. But other than that, I don't think anybody's going to judge you harshly on the screening plants you use. It's really about using as many things as possible. So if something comes along here and wipes out any of these individual things, so no big deal. I probably have planted them close enough together I could live without that one entirely and they would just fill in anyway. Or I plug something else in there and have fun with it again. So if cedar and pine mulch are the same price, which is a better option? So, I think if this is pine bark mulch, it's not going to break down all that fast, and it's going to potentially wash if it's on any kind of slope. So I'll let you decide on that. The cedar's probably going to be a little more likely to stay in place, but it usually has kind of rounded edges too and doesn't really mat down as well. If it's cedar bark, that may sit down a little better and compress a little bit better. But I think about sometimes when we think about cedar, we're the original cedar, eastern red cedar, which is Juniperus virginiana. It's a juniper, it's not an actual cedar. But when Europeans got here and started cutting those down, they have so much natural oil in them that the wood lasts a long time. Okay, fast forward several hundred years, all the old growth junipers have long been cut down. And what has grown in their place is a much faster growing, a plant that's been pushed much harder. So the things that are being called cedar, if you're buying a board at Lowe's or Home Depot or lumberyard, the things that are being called cedar now were grown very differently. They don't have these really, really dense wood with that high oil content. So it's just not the same as it once was. And I think everybody in their minds are like, cedar lasts forever. It did. There was a time, that anything built out of that old growth juniper was worth its weight in gold, basically, because it lasted a long time. But it's not that way anymore. So if you're thinking about it between what will last longer, that pine bark will probably actually outlive it as a mulch. But kind of interesting though, that cedar is not what it once was, and nor can we wait 300 years for to harvest one from an old growth forest, because we just don't have those kind of spaces anymore. Are there any plants that attract fireflies? Dead ones. That's the main thing that we need to have more fireflies, is we need to leave fallen trees. We have a lot of fireflies in this garden, a lot of fireflies. And I think the people that are here on the Friday evening, by 8 o'clock, you'll see that out here. There's fireflies everywhere. The reason we have more fireflies is because we have this wooded area back here where trees fall down back there and they just rot on the ground. That's the places that fireflies really need. And we're just too neat and orderly in our gardens. From corner to corner to corner, people feel like they have to control every square foot of their garden. We need a bit more mess for all of these insects. Well, okay, here's a question that can't be answered. This person has invasive vines in Virginia creeper, which is native, of course, to Virginia and here. And they have porcelain berry. Porcelain berries are worst possible. It's maybe the worst weed we have in this garden. It's so good at hiding in a plant. And then if you try to pull it, it breaks apart. I showed it a few weeks ago over there. It's segmented and it just break apart. How to eradicate without harming plants? Unfortunately, you got to get in there with a trowel and dig the root up just a little bit. If you pull on any of them, they just break and then they just come right back. So you got to get in there and dig them out a bit. The problem for us with porcelain vine is the birds spread it. So it's a really good, well-designed vine because birds eat it, and then they sit on fences and they sit on things that the vine can easily climb on. So the seed comes out in the perfect spot for it to come up. But that's a tough weed to get rid of, but you got to dig them a little bit. So this person had poppies planted over their daffodils, so they take over when the daffodils are done. Is this denying them too much sun? Is that an issue? So we do want sunlight, after those daffodils are done, we do need some sunlight on that foliage for it to rebuild the bulb. But like somebody else had pointed out, the trees leaf out above them. So it's kind of normal for them to go into some shade, for other things to kind of come over them and take over a bit. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. It would be better if they had sun for longer, but I like to have things come up through them because I don't want to look at them. So I'm denying them a bit of light as well. Somebody asked about females in horticulture. Are there females in horticulture, and are there growers in automative production? Do you need a college degree? You don't necessarily need a college degree. Everything you could need to learn is out in the world. You can get a job at a garden center, you can get a job at a nursery, you can get a job at landscape company, whatever you want, and learn. And I would recommend having a very broad, the way I sit here and answer these questions is some of them are from my knowledge landscaping, some of them are from my knowledge at working at the garden center or having a garden center. Some of them are based on my ownership of a business in horticulture. Some of them are based on my 23 years in the nursery business. So, I have a wider range of knowledge than some do, just because I didn't go down one track. I jumped around. Probably not the greatest thing, but overall, but it worked out for me. So if you're not going to go into, through a horticulture program, or at least a 2-year program, like Spartanburg Community College has a great 2-year hort program. We did a video with Kevin Paris down there. He's speaking before me tomorrow, as I'm filming this, I'm speaking at the plant symposium. Kevin is speaking right before me tomorrow about magnolias. You know, at least that 2-year program, there's a 2-year program at NC State, you know, or whatever. But make sure what you would get out of that college program is probably you would get to visit nurseries, you'd get to see the production, you see greenhouse production, you'd see a lot of that. You see a lot of that automation. It's where they're, you know, actually studying all that automation, you know, or in these universities. So you get a lot out of that. In terms of females, more than ever. 40 years ago when I started this, there were, you know, women working at garden centers mainly, but not really the nursery so much. But a lot of the nurserymen, you know, didn't have sons, and so the daughters are taking them over all over the country, and it's kind of amazing. They're every bit as good at it as anybody would, as you would expect, obviously, and we're just seeing more and more of that everywhere we go now. I fully expect every nursery that I walk into now is going to have women in all capacities of this business, top to bottom. So yeah, jump in. I wouldn't even think about that anymore. It's a non-issue. Okay. Number 17, some planted plants seem to dry out faster than the surrounding soil. I talked about the hydrophobic soil just a couple of weeks ago. You know, some of these plants now, the nurseries want to make sure that they're not overwatering when they irrigate, and so they're using bark mixes that really the water just falls right through them. When we plant that into our soil, sometimes it dries out faster than that surrounding soil, and it is problematic, and it seems to take longer on some plants to get them established in our gardens than it used to. They want to know if they should dig them up and remove the soil and blah, blah, blah. I think you might end up doing more damage. What you have to do, I had an azalea over here, and for 2 solid weeks, it just didn't seem like I could give it enough water. We eventually got 2-3 cloudy days and a little bit of rain, and that plant was able to catch up. So I just monitor these plants a little bit closer, water them when they're wilting, and then they'll break through. But I have a feeling if I'd have dug that plant up, tried to knock that soil off of it, and then replanted it, and then all of a sudden it's 90 degrees outside, I'd have probably done more damage to it. So potentially done more damage to it. So with these plants, just stay on top of them, monitor them, know that they're on your list until they're not on your list. That azalea now is not wilted in a week, but for 2 weeks, it was just felt like every 6 hours, it was wilting again. But it was related to that container mix that was in it. So somebody said they're overwintering hostas in zone 8B. How should they do it? They're in containers. Should they let them die back outside and then store them in the garage? No, just store them outside. I grew hosta for 20 years in my nursery. We literally put the pots pot to pot, and we didn't even cover them in the wintertime. It would have shocked me to not have a hosta come back in the nursery in zone 8B. They're just not going to freeze. The pot will freeze for a day or two, maybe the entire winter, and that'll be it. It doesn't hurt hosta at all in zone 8B, but leave them outside. You don't want the risk of them coming up by keeping them abnormally warm. But literally, we put them pot to pot, never put a cover on hosta in the wintertime. They were growing under some pine trees, so a little bit of pine straw would fall on them in the fall. Not enough that they were covered, but enough that maybe it was insulating that bed a bit. But hosta, I mean, they're zone 3 hardy, you're in zone 8B. Leave them in the pot, leave them outside. This person has 3-year-old pine nuggets, but they aren't breaking down readily, and I've talked about this. The big chunks of pine bark don't break down. It's what makes them a great material for growing in nursery pots, because it doesn't shrink, while they're growing the plant, and also makes a great material for breaking up clay soil and mixing in when you plant, because it just doesn't break down. So they want to know if they can just mulch over the top of it, and will that help it break down? Yeah, I would just use a small amount of hardwood bark over it. Don't bury it too deep. We're not trying to get this stuff so thick. They've got they were talking about should they remove some of it and then mulch and that kind of thing. I probably wouldn't. We're putting a very thin layer of hardwood mulch out here right now. I would just use a very thin layer of decorative hardwood mulch. Maybe that'll keep a little more moisture around that bark and get it breaking down a little bit, but it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. The excess mulch buildup is your biggest problem. So if I go in there and I put 3 inches of hardwood bark on top of what you already have, then you're going to start to get to that point where you're going to have dry sockets down in that bark. So super thin layer over the top of it, leave them in place. They'll break down eventually, but it's just going to be slower. And that hardwood bark should help some. Somebody asked, is concrete and rock and other construction debris a problem left by builders in soil? Does it depend on the plant? Yeah, absolutely. It probably depends on the plant. I'm not going to dig a lot of that material up, but man, I did so much new construction landscaping, you know, where, you know, all that stuff had just been pushed back up against the house. Brick is benign. It's really not an issue. Concrete can have some lime in it, which could leach into your soil. Maybe change the pH, probably not all that big of a deal either, unless you had a copious amount of it in the bed. I don't think it's overall a problem. The biggest problem is cleaning, you know, you planting, you know, because it's hard to dig in it probably. I definitely don't want any of, you know, roofing material and, you know, lumber bits and those kinds of things. As you find those things, I'm definitely going to throw those away. If there's a large chunk of concrete, I'm probably going to try to get that out if I can. But small pieces of concrete and other, you know, like pieces of brick and that kind of thing, I'm probably not going to worry about, other than the fact that it's not the easiest thing to dig in. But man, have I seen it all in terms of what can get buried on a construction site. The worst one is the construction sand, where they'll get the big sand pile brought in for the mason work, and they'll do whatever the foundation is, and then they may use that sand if you have, you know, a brick wall that they've got to put up or whatever, but then that construction sand just gets buried somewhere, and it's just like a completely different kind of soil over there in that part of your garden. I saw that recently up the road on a new house, where all the sand went to one side of the garden and all the clay went to the other side. It's just two completely different planting areas. So somebody has some green giants in Middle Tennessee. A quarter of them are declining. They have 30 of them. A quarter of them are declining after this past winter. Looks like vertical slits in the trunks. Will they heal, or should they give up on the idea of a uniform hedge? Well, you know, I just talked about, you know, try to avoid. I got a fly that's bugging me. I don't really do uniform hedges just because, you know, at the end of the day, if some disease comes along or something happens, they blow over. These green giants are going to get 70 feet tall. What happens when they blow over? It's going to cost you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to have them removed. You know, I can tell you there's somebody watching this video whose pocketbook has been very badly hurt by removing very large conifers that blew over in storms or died from various other reasons as well. But the vertical slits are the part that are concerning. You know, that's cracked. Basically, I talked about this the entire fall last year. We just weren't having fall. It stayed summer, and then, you know, right through November, we had nights in November that were in the 60s, you know, right through November, and then bam, it was 14 degrees. I imagine it was worse over in Middle Tennessee than that for you. So that's what popped them. You know, they still had moisture in the tree, and so there's a ton of questions. Every week, if you read through the questions at the bottom of these videos, people have cracks in trees. Every consultation I've done this spring, half the consultations I've done this spring, splits in trees, you know, where this happened. Because again, there was moisture in the trunk, that water froze in the trunk, expanded it, and popped it open. Will they recover is a who knows. That is nothing but time will tell kind of issues. Sometimes plants just heal right over. They can bleed right into that spot, fill it in, and move on. And some plants just drop dead. I had a crack in one of the major limbs on that red bud over there. Luckily, it was up at the top on a limb that was coming down, and it killed that branch dead. But if it had happened lower down in the plant, it probably would have killed the entire tree. Time, unfortunately. You're going to know a lot by late summer, I think, about whether those are actually dead or not. Got another irrigation question for the final question this week. This person's in Southwest Idaho, needs irrigation in an arid climate. We went through Boise 2 years ago was that in like October? I think it was mid to late October when we went through Boise. Should they use drip or spray system? Definitely drip is, again, you're in another high desert climate like that. And Drip is going to be better because anytime you launch water into the air, into very low humidity, some of that water doesn't reach the ground because it evaporates. So you're always going to be better using drip in those arid places if you can do it. The disadvantage of drip is it's going to require some maintenance here and there. You're going to you're going to be planting something. You're going to cut it occasionally. It's easy to repair, so not saying it's hard to repair or anything. You want to have materials on hand. Even if you don't install it, you'd want to have repair materials because you're going to cut it here and there. You know, any kind of automated system like that has the potential for the clock to whatever, you know, some sort of storm, cause some electrical problem, batteries die in a clock that uses batteries, electricity goes out and the clock resets. You know, there's any kind of irrigation system is going to have to be monitored. You know, I've never put in an automated irrigation system, period. I mean, I could. I've done tons of irrigation, but I don't like to put in systems. I like to, again, but going back to that question I talked about earlier about watering in the garden, I like to make decisions on watering. Now, you're in Southwest Idaho in a high desert and your decisions have been made for you. You're definitely watering. There's some portion of the year it just doesn't rain, so you're definitely watering. So yours makes more sense as an automated system than it does here in the Southeast, where we're going to go 4 months potentially practically flooding, and then 4 months maybe where it doesn't rain, but they're random. They're more random than they are for you. You can kind of predict when it's going to be dry. If you do use overhead irrigation, I will say it's easier to measure how much water you're actually using. So you could put a tray out there and collect the water, and you could see, well, I'm getting about an inch every whatever amount of time it takes to run. And that's how much water I want to put down. So it's easier to monitor that way. It's a little harder to figure out how much water you're applying through drip. But that can be measured as well. So again, I think in any dry climate, you don't want to be throwing water in the air if you can help it, because there's some percentage of it that is not landing back on the ground. So there you go, guys. I look forward, by the time I talk to the camera again for a Q&A, the open garden will have already happened. So looking forward to seeing folks here in the garden on Friday and Saturday. Again, we'll have t-shirts and then all kinds of giveaways. If you are thinking about buying a shirt, you know, obviously not obligated to buy a shirt while you're here, but if you are, cash will be quicker, and we'll probably have a small discount for using cash and not paying the fees on the credit card. Thank you guys so much for watching. Ask gardening questions down in the comment section, and we'll do another one of these next week. Thanks.